and that's when she called out her name, like, no, Alina, we need to go. Jesper was nearby, so now he knows how she looks. So this episode opens with Maul returning to the outpost. Obviously, he is injured and alone. Ravka and Mikhail were killed in the ambush in the previous episode. And so, you know, they saw him, they could see that he was injured, and they ran out to assist him. We then flash to Marco and the troop, along with Inez and Jesper. They are at the gate talking to the guard. They're at the gate of the palace, showing them the paperwork. Marco is, you know, explaining that they were hired to entertain for that evening. And the guard was making sure all the paperwork was in order. He then basically told them, you know, this paperwork restricts them to certain areas, and they're not allowed to go outside of that.
It's writ. Allows you access to the grounds, the main ballroom, and nowhere else.
So while they were talking, there was this commotion that happened behind them. He just ended up waving them in and was focusing on what the other guards were trying to restrain. A guy claiming he wanted to go in to talk to the king or the general, I can't remember. And then you saw Cass. So his way of getting into the palace was to pose as a guard. And so the guy was, I guess he had hired the guy to create the distraction so that he can get in. And so that's how Cass was able to get into the palace.
Right, that's enough. We really need the entire court.
Okay, so the next scene is Alina, and, you know, she's kind of talking to a couple of the other Grishas at the palace. Eventually, Genya, I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong. She arrived and to get her ready for the event that's supposed to take place later on that night. And of course, she's supposed to be the star attraction. And so we found out a couple of things in this episode. When Genya was saying that, you know, I guess it had been a regular thing whenever she saw her to ask if she had received any correspondence from Maul, and of course she just told her before she could even ask, you know, we haven't received anything as of yet. And she basically told her that she didn't have to update her anymore, that she has enough on her plate.
Still nothing from Mal.
You don't have to update me anymore.
And so Genya started saying, well, you know, you got that, you know, basically agreeing with her and talking about how the queen treats her like she doesn't need sleep, and she woke her up at the butt crack of dawn to, I guess, she's not a healer, she's a tailor, I guess, to, you know, fix whatever the wrinkles and all that kind of stuff to beautify her for the event. And Alina was like, you know, I could temporarily blind her for you if you want. And so she said, well, that won't be necessary. You know, at least this takes the king's gaze. It gives the king something to look at until nightfall.
It tends to shift the king's gaze in her direction, at least until nightfall.
And so the comment, the way, you know, the comment and her facial expression was basically saying that she not only helps the queen, but in other ways she is expected to help the king. The next thing they talked about was her attire. The general wanted her to wear black for the event, and Genya was saying that, you know, I know he wants you to wear black for the event, but after that we could switch you back to your blue. And Alina was like, well, no, you know, we could just use black going forward.
I know the general insisted on black for the performance, but perhaps after you could return to blue.
I think I'm going to stick with the black.
So it's like she's, you know, trying to detach herself more and more from Maul. David, who's a fabricator, he came in, and you find out that Genya has a thing for David. They're attracted to each other, but it's kind of awkward, right? And she was able to pick up on that. And so the reason he was there is because the general had him make these gloves for her that amplifies her power.
They're lovely.
What do they do?
And, you know, she was able to show him that she is quite capable of, you know, manifesting and controlling her power on her own. But she thanked him for, you know, the gloves, but that she didn't need them. And then she went on teasing Genya about it was obvious that she had a thing for David. So, and the next scene, you can hear Kaz kind of going over the plan, how they're going to find her and get out. So he is going to walk the route that she was going to take to the event and to dinner afterwards in the dressing room and the whole thing, and try to decide when would be a good time to grab her.
I'll walk the route our target will take from the ballroom to the dinner event and look for an ambush point.
So you flash to Inez and Jasper. Inez is rehearsing and she's kind of asking Jasper for his opinion, like how's she doing, how she look, does she look like, she know what she's doing. It's been so long since she's done this.
Does this look right? I haven't done this routine since I was 14.
And then you see that he's distracted. And he's distracted because he's focused on the stable hand instead of the task at hand. And of course, when she brought that to his attention, he tried to play it off a little bit, right?
I think you're flirting with that stable hand.
What stable? Oh, him. I suppose he's moderately attractive, but I haven't really noticed.
And, they talked back and forth, and you can see that she's concerned, and is concerned. They started talking about whether or not they even believe in the Sun Summoner. Like, at this point, it's just been this old wives' tale. Nobody's ever seen one. And so she is kind of showing, like, you can kind of tell that she believes, but she's concerned. Kaz believes it's a bunch of hogwash. He doesn't believe it at all. And Jasper, his response was basically, as long as we get paid and we're able to do what we need to do, I don't care if it's real or not. So back at the outpost, the general is sending a letter to General Kerrigan. And of course, just before it was dispatched, Maul arrived, and he was basically saying that he was the person that caught the stag, and that, he should be allowed to, be the one to take the letter.
I'm the one who found the stag. I should be the one to deliver the new star.
And so the general ended up sending him along with the guy that he was originally going to send. So Genya and Alina, they're kind of walking through the palace. They're talking about the day's events, and then she noticed the carnival and everything that's going on out in front of the palace. And of course, she wanted to go out. Genya was basically like, no, somebody might recognize you.
Only the people in the palaces know who I am. Can't I just have this one thing before everything changes?
She was like, you know what, the only people that know what I look like, who I am, are the people that's in the palace. So they end up going out. And she came upon Marco. And then when they are, basically, they've put on this performance. And they have this actress playing the role of Alina. They know her name, but they don't know what she looks like. And Alina was kind of messing around with Genya, saying, baby, I should let them know. And that's when she called out her name, like, no, Alina, we need to go. Jasper was nearby, so now he knows how she looks. So
should I tell him?
Alina, no. Not everyone knows what you look like. If we get caught here.
So now the group, they're all together. The conductor, Jasper, Inez, and Kaz, and he's giving them an update. And of course, they, wanted to make sure, like, how do you know it was her? And
Sure, it was her. I'm telling you. She's part shoe.
And he explained to them, what was said and what happened. And their plan now is the conductor is going to grab her because he's figured out that she's going to be in like this secret dressing room. And there's only one way in, and the conductor knows how to get into the room. So he's going to be responsible for getting into the room to grab her. Kaz and Inez is going to be responsible for clearing the path, making sure they have a clear exit. And Jasper is going to be responsible for the exit, the actual exit, them getting away from the palace. So Alina ends up going to talk to Kerrigan, and they talked a little bit. And she had to admit that it was funny because he was asking her if she was nervous initially, and she was like, "Well, I thought about throwing myself down the stairs to get out of it, but then I decided against it." And he ended up saying, "Well, that wouldn't have worked anyway because we have healers." And then she had to, seriously, she had to admit that she was nervous, and that she, felt like an outsider when she first got there, and how she doesn't feel like that anymore, and how she felt like she has a greater calling, and is to unite Ravka and save their people.
I've always felt like an outsider, especially when I first got here. But now I finally feel like I belong.
And he was happy to hear that. And then, the long-awaited kiss, you would think it would be him to make the to make the first move, but he's always so in control, right? So she ends up walking over and kissing him, and of course he kissed her back. It was, and then he ends up saying, you know, very few people surprised me, but he was definitely surprised that she initiated that whole situation. But of course, you know, someone knocked on the door and interrupted them because they needed to talk to Kerrigan. Okay, so Jesper is now in his, I guess, uniform or costume that he's supposed to perform in, and he goes into the stables. He's trying to decide, you know, the horses that he need to take. And of course, the stable hand is there, and he's pretending like he's there to collect horses for some other person. And they go banter back and forth and talk a little bit, and then eventually they have them a little situation. It's like, Jesper, can you ever stay on task? So now it's the event. The palace is filled wall to wall with people. They're, you know, there to see the spectacle. And Inez is performing. She's kind of like in the staircase where, you know, she's on the curtain. I don't even know what to call that. And she's performing. And of course, hating-ass Zoya is there. One of the women are walking up the stairs. I'm assuming that was her husband. And she was saying how she didn't know that Zemini had so much talent. And of course, Zoya chimes in, she's Suli.
I didn't know that Zemini had such talent. She's Suli.
And kind of walks off. It's like, girl, you just a hateful something, ain't you? Girl, Lord, get over it. So, Kaz is at his post, and he ends up pouring something on himself, water or something. And he walked out, and the guards basically saw him and said that you can't, you know, look like that. You can't look all disheveled like that. You get all these, you know, highfalutin people here, and of course, you know, royalty and the whole such. And so they end up sending him to change his uniform, which of course was the plan.
You can't wear that. Get a replacement from laundry.
So while he was there changing his uniform, Inez met up with him and she ended up giving her a bag that contains a uniform so she could change out of her costume.
Just be happy I'm eager to get out. Yes.
And the conductor shows up to get his bag that contains the tool he needs to get into this room so that he could grab Alina.
See you at the meeting point.
Okay, so eventually the general arrives, and of course, you know, that people applauded and the whole thing. And then Alina arrived, and he couldn't take his eyes off her, maybe because she was dressed in all black, which is his signature color or something. It was something about this black, okay. And, you know, he went over to talk to her because, you know, everybody's there to see her. So he kind of put her at ease and that, you know, he's there to help her. And so they perform. And so he do his thing. And then he step aside. And she does her thing. And she did it well, and everybody was happy and excited. And, you know, again, all this pressure of her to be the savior of everyone, you know. But she seems to be kind of coming along, she's coming into her own at this point. So while they're all in there, you know, praising her, and they're all like treating her like she's the second coming, like literally the people are like doing the whole thing and on their knees. And okay, so we flash to Jesper. So his whole entanglement is coming to an end, right? So they all laying, so they're both laying there all out of breath and all like, that was amazing. And
that was, yeah, I mean, I know.
Then there was a noise, and then he said that he had to go, and I forget what happened, but they ended up having to lock the place down. He wasn't letting anyone in or out. And so while they were talking to the guards were talking to the guy who just had the little rolling hay with Jesper, I can't even think my below it. He slipped off with 2 horses. So I mean, okay, granted he got the horses, but Lord have mercy, you do it the most. Just you stay doing the most. Okay. So there was a brief scene of the conductor. He found the room, and he was able to go into the room unseen. So now, at this point, he's just lying in wait. There was also a brief scene of Maul and the other guy arriving at the palace. So they're talking to the guard. They're showing them the paperwork. They've been sent there by the general to, deliver this message to General Kerrigan. And so the guard has just let them into the palace. So Alina's walking down the staircase, and she has another weird encounter with the librarian. And he's, basically telling her that she has a right to be pleased with herself. And then he goes in to tell her how, how she's becoming dangerous and how she's going to become more dangerous and how she don't fully understand her role and what's expected of her. You can't see her face like, what are you talking about?
You will become even more dangerous still. You have no idea how much larger a role you have to play, do you? And,
they talk a little bit more. And eventually, shows up and basically pulls her away, saying that, you need to get ready. The general needs me to get you ready for dinner. Okay, so in the following scene, Maul and the other soldier that he traveled with, they're now waiting in Kerrigan's office for him to arrive. And so eventually he does. And he asked about the stag. And the other officer said, well, he was the one that found the stag, obviously referring to Maul. And so he asked him, because he didn't know him offhand, he asked his name. And he said his name.
And you are? Alina Starkov.
And then he realized who he was talking to, Alina's friend, Maul. And you kind of see his facial expression kind of like, okay.
Mel.
So he ended up asking the other officer to leave because he wanted to talk to Maul by himself. And he, started asking him, like, how do you know it was the right one? He started asking questions. And then he asked him where to draw exactly where he saw the stag.
Show me where.
North of Chernast.
No, precisely. Mark it for me.
And he was smart. He said, no, not until I see Alina.
Not until I see Alina.
And so he tried to act like, well, a lot of people say they know her, so how do I know that you know her? And it was basically his way of trying to get some information out of him. Saying, what is something personal that only that you would know? And then he said something about her favorite flower. He asked it, like, what's her favorite flower? And he told her the flower and the exact color. And so he told him that he would show him to a room and he would talk to her. And if she wanted to see him, then he would arrange for them to meet. So, of course, Bagra is in her dungeon. I don't even know what that is. And one of these guards came to talk to her, was letting her know that a tracker had arrived and that the tracker has information of where the stag is. And, of course, now all of a sudden Bagra is upset and she's saying, bring him to me.
We cannot let him obtain that kind of power.
And the guard ended up telling her that he was already they already took him to talk to Kerrigan, and she's basically saying that basically the worst thing that could happen is for him to get the stag because he's already powerful, and it's gonna, if he gets the power, then it's gonna make him damn near invincible, unstoppable.
We cannot let him obtain that kind of power.
And so she proceeded to give her instructions, the guard instructions. So Genya and Alina head to her dressing room. Remember that the conductor was already there lying in wait. Alina went in, and as she was sitting at the desk, the conductor popped out. And you realized that he was a double agent. So he wasn't there to help them abduct her. He was there to kill her on behalf of General Zoltan, who is the general of the First Army, I believe.
This is from General Zoltan.
And so he ends up cutting her throat. Genya runs in to, fight, and he ends up shooting her in the shoulder. So now she's down. He runs out. He didn't get far. He got caught. And then you realize that it wasn't actually Alina. It was a glamour. So Genya, Lord, was able to kind of change one of the other Grisha's face so that it looked like as a double, basically a decoy. And so in the end, she ended up killing Maria, I think that was her name, which is one of Alina's friends.
I'm here, Maria. Put me back. I don't want to time with the wrong face on.
So we flash to the party, and they, you know, have eyes on Alina. She's mingling and talking to other people, and so they go up to her, basically saying that they're there to escort her to dinner.
Come. We're to escort you to dinner. If you come with us, please.
And so there was a guard, Grisha, who kind of saw them. They kind of stood out a little bit. He thought something was off. And so as they were walking towards the kitchen, General Kerrigan, he appeared and basically said that he would take it from there and that he would escort her to dinner.
Thank you. I'll take it from here.
And so they walked off, and so General Kerrigan and Alina walked off. And so Kaz was like, okay, plan B. They had this backup plan. But then they realized that they'd been spotted, and so now they have to think on the fly. So they kind of separate and go in two different directions. And the guy ends up following Kaz. So the guard who is supposed to be escorting Maul, she is asking him questions about, how about the stag, and she finds out that he hasn't told the general yet where the stag is located. And so of course he asked her where, she was taking him, and she ends up taking him because they were outside at this point. So she ends up taking him, I guess that was Bulgar's play, and she tried to kill him. And it was a fight. Now that was a decent little fight, but he prevailed. And he ended up killing her. So we flash to Kerrigan and Alina. So of course he didn't take her to dinner. He ends up taking her to his office, and of course they flirt a little bit. And then just as they was about to have them a little entanglement, a little situation, there was a knock at the door, and it was one of the guards letting him know that there was the incident in Alina's dressing room, and that Maria and Genya was attacked, and he ends up having to leave to go and take care of that.
Maria and Genya were attacked in the fitting room. Alina was the target. We have a suspect in custody.
So Bagra, there's a secret passage in his office, and so she was able to come through that way, and she basically shuttled Alina out through the passage and is basically telling her that you need to leave, like you're in danger.
You need to leave this place.
What? Why?
And then she ends up revealing some truths that Kerrigan is actually the Black Heretic.
Child, Alexander is the Black Heretic.
He's I don't know how many centuries years old. He took a nobleman's name to hide his identity because he is the one responsible for creating the fold. And she didn't believe her. It's like, well, what are you talking about? And then she had to show her powers. And of course, she's also a shadow summoner. And she was like, well, and of course that's what Alina was like, wait a minute, only people from his bloodline can, and then she realized Barbara is actually Kerrigan's mother. And she's basically telling her that, he's basically the cause of all this, and that he's going to use you to amplify his power, that he's always been power hungry. And, she tried to warn him, and, where he created this fold, that used to be a city, a civilization, and Volcra, they used to be people, the men, women, and children. And by him trying to use this power to create this army, it created these monsters.
He didn't think about the people who lived there, what such power would do to them. Turned them into the twisted, evil things that attacked you.
And of course, initially, Alina was basically like, well, she will stay and fight. And she was like, girl, you are no match for him at this point. I was hoping that I would have more time to train you to get you ready, but you're not ready, and it's your best bet for now to go into hiding. And so she kind of moved her down. There was another passage, and she was sending her down this corridor and told her that, it's going to be food rations there and to stay there until she, comes to get her. So Kerrigan ends up going back to his office, obviously to find out that find it empty. And Kerrigan is now outside. He saw his mother, and they finally have a tete-a-tete. And she, basically, he asked about the tracker, because at this point she thinks that Maul is dead. And so she ends up telling him that she disposed of the tracker. And how basically she's not going to let him use Alina to get any more power. And of course, he basically told her that, you know, her position there is, you know, sketchy, and basically you're really not needed anymore. So basically, don't push me. And she eventually says that, you know, she's gone. Basically, it's going to take a tracker to find her, and basically good luck. And so he walked off, and then you saw Maul. He was standing behind a tree. He heard the entire conversation.
I'd wager you need a skilled tracker to find her now.
So there was this scene where the guy eventually caught up with Kaz, and a fight ensued. And Kaz, you know, he fought, you know, he did a little something. The guy was knocked down, and just as the guy got up as Kaz was walking away, and Inez appeared just in time before he set Kaz on fire and basically ended up stabbing him. He ended up killing him. So now they have to meet up with Jesper at the meetup spot. And so Jesper is he's standing off to the side. He already has the carriage prepared and everything. And then he was like, wait a minute. So is this serendipity or what? So while he was standing there, Alina had made her way outside, and she'd hid in the back of, in one of the trunks that was on the back of the carriage. Inez and Kaz appeared, and Kaz ended up asking about Alina, and Jesper didn't want to say anything at that point, and he ends up asking, so do we have an eye on our target?
Do we have a fix on where the target is?
And this is what Kaz asked Jesper, and Jesper kind of smirked, and he, you know, got the horses moving, and they're on their way out away from the palace. And that is pretty much how this episode ends. So yeah.